The Crooked Epic. 1. In. 1. The Inn of Maniacal Madness. 2. Ted. The Graveyard. 2B. 1. The next dawn, Ted tossed and turned and slumbered much later than usual. He wiped the coals from his eyes and stretched. Out of the windows to the side of the den room, he could see how the family's cars were gone. But the sound of splashing water in the kitchen synchronized with his subtle descent off the first step. When he finally came down the stairs, he saw how the father had already left to work. How their new nanny was there had become a sublime realization, hitting him like cold, crushed ice, abruptly unsettling the monotony of his lazy morning. However, the splashing water in the sink lulled him to the kitchen. From the staircase, her sing-song, high-pitched voice rang. "Theodore, I'm Irene Wilson, your new Nana while your father works this summer. Your father didn't want to wake you. He had to leave almost an hour ago. But don't worry, I have oatmeal ready to get started this morning. I'll let you get ready on your own, at least for today. You don't have to explain much, but we'll cover the ground rules." Before he even saw Irene Wilson, she sounded quite nice. Still, when he entered the kitchen and sat down at the table, the emotion must have been slowly fading off his face, because she turned around and gave him a more comforting smile intended to ease him into the new morning ritual. She was dark-skinned, with beaming eyes and a welcoming grace to her appearance. "Your brother Alex got up with your dad and went into town with them. I think he was getting dropped off at a friend's house and maybe riding back here by noon with them. Oatmeal is almost done, dear." After he finished the bowl with an apple cut up into pieces in maple syrup, he was ready to fix his notebooks and pack his study bag to bring out with him to the barn. Slyly, though, he considered that it may be better to do his reading upstairs in his room that morning while Alex was still out with his friends. Additionally, there was somebody new in the house whom he thought he could impress more if he persevered with a reserved position and stayed within supervisory limits. So, once he was done eating, he started over to the study room after putting his dishes on the counter by the sink. "Your father will be picking me up in the mornings when I don't need to stay the night. You'll see, I'll mostly stay out of your way, but I'll also be available if you have any thoughts or questions. My family raised me a Christian in Milford. I've learned a lot on my own over the years." Irene Wilson was in her late 30s, at a tall 5'10", a thin lady wearing a fluffed plain black dress. The existence of a new babysitter was a little intriguing. Still, he was mostly surprised by the unexpected presence that morning and was a little shy, but only because he was fresh as a fourth-grade graduate. He spoke to her about some of his interests with hesitant curiosity. "I usually like to study out of encyclopedias from the library and about nature." She smiled again, which made him realize the abstract statement which he had just completed and unspecific descriptions he had so far provided of his favorite studies, and it compelled him to continue the haphazard explanation. "I like to draw the animals from them and to organize the kinds of plants from the encyclopedia all in my notebook. I'm learning to play chess, and I usually play with Alex and his friends. Sometimes I sit in the barn and read." As serious as he could muster, Ted paused and looked to Mrs. Wilson for her reactions, and she smiled again, somewhat empathetically. "Well, you sound pretty smart, Mr. Theodore. Or Teddy, is that what you like to be called?" "Ted, or Teddy is just fine, Mrs. Wilson. Is it Mrs.?" Mrs. Wilson grinned and nodded agreeably. "Oh, and I think my friends Benjamin and Darren from school will come to visit me this summer. I'd like to go fishing with Alex, too. There's no fish in the pond out in the front of the house. We all have to walk to the lake." Now Ted began to feel conversational enough to be topical anyway, and he felt himself open up to Mrs. Wilson. "That's okay with me if it sounds fun to you. Let me know if you have any nice pictures to show your father and me. I don't play chess, but maybe I can someday show you how I play the piano." Mrs. Wilson turned to the sink, put on an apron from a chair, and started pouring the water to wash the bowls and pots. But she was still smiling when Ted walked out to the study room. Okay, I'll be upstairs. Then he sorted through the books in his school bag next to his desk and put the ones he wanted into his satchel. I'll look at some books until my brother Alex gets home. He noticed Mrs. Wilson's big tote bag of personal belongings sitting next to the kitchen door near the pantry attached between the side door and supper table. When he gets here, let me know, okay? The notification was ample for him, and he did not stay to wait for a response. Ted walked up the stairs to his room. His introduction to Mrs. Wilson allowed him to immediately commence his summer studies of the esoteric and entertaining essay volumes he had selected. He cleared some surfaces to lay down his books and papers and carefully put the ones occupying the desktop and floor back on the shelves. The quick reorganization of the bedroom brought renewed vitality to the space. Alex and Ted had desks and bookshelves in their rooms, although Alex's was mostly all filled with rock specimen trinkets and toys. Mother's work area was in a small study across the hall from the master bedroom, between the stairs and the guest room. A filing cabinet, shelves, a large desk, and a splendid rug and sofa were in it. Father kept his study space in the attic. They rarely visited behind a locked door at the top of a narrow stairwell, at the other end of the hall, nearer Ted's room and the larger bedroom on the left. Alex's bedroom was almost across the stairs, and the doors were separated by a small closet space on either side of the hall. The downstairs also had a small washroom on the side of the house, just past the pantry and through the kitchen. The den room was where they kept their telephone, stereo with amplitude modulation radio, and their parents' bookshelf. The shared school study room, adjacent to the front door, had access to the set of stairs which led to the basement, that was small, with a laundry room and half unfinished, with a bare cement floor beneath the mostly empty wine cellar. A storm exit always stayed shut behind a door leading up to the backyard. Sunlight streamed through Ted's window and the rays shined, so the faint blue of the clear sky threw a tinted yellow through the panes and curtain from which the rising angle gave way to brightening white streams of warmth in the air around his desk, where motes of dust danced. For 2 hours he eyed pages which turned by his hand without much of his relaxed brain's retained attention. Instead, he imagined mindless daydreams which he lucidly weaved in and out of as he exasperated his ability to concentrate on any of the reading. It was all distracting, especially while in the face of such a long break from the monotony of school days. Ted stood up in the front of the window and moved around his body to stretch. He decided that he might try to draw a tracing of a tiger, as he had done some research on the animals of Asia that school year. Looking out at the long green back lawn with patches of low grass and tightly trimmed bushes and tree line beyond, Ted resolved to sit in the barn, hoping that he might regain the initiative to start sketching. Ted took up the satchel again and walked down the stairs, where he peeked through the hall to the dining room and kitchen to see if Mrs. Wilson was still in there. She was not, and her bag was gone, so Ted curiously went to the study room, where he saw her sitting in one of the 2 seats by the big front window. "I'm going outside." Ted walked to the pantry, "to sit in the barn and draw more." "Fine idea. It's beautiful out. I will stay and read more, but if I'm not in here when you come back, it might mean I've wandered out to the pond." "Oh, there's no fish in there, but sure." Mrs. Wilson smiled. "Well, I might walk down to look at it, or sit out in the yard if Alex doesn't come back." "Okay." Smiling back, Ted went through the side door into the bright light outside. As he walked to the barn, he felt a slight hesitation in his pace as he neared the driveway. Recollecting the dog incident, he wondered if it would happen again. He started internally to wish it would not, because he did not know what would happen with Mrs. Wilson there and not the father to make an interruption if necessary, nor even Alex to share the action with. Yet the far tree line just waved its leaves in the breeze, sparkling tall green in a way that mimicked the grass blades with dancing imitation, and the quiet of the clear air set him at ease. Inside the big doors, the barn was dimly lit by a giant window which hung above, where one could access it by a walkway extending off the left side, where there was a huge wooden platform lofted 15 feet above the bare dirt below. The back right of the barn was a construction space or workstation, which used the previously built walls that had separated the old horse stalls. Across from the additions, the father had built the small tool shed extension and workbench stations far on the left side. There were also 2 windows on the right side of the barn wall, and one more, smaller sized in the workstation in the back, and a hay window in the loft. Their mother's car sat in the back dusty and untouched. Additionally, a ladder stood near the front left that led to the loft, where there were a few chairs and 2 tables for the children to sit around. There was a lantern and a small radio in the loft they never used, except for baseball broadcasting, and lanterns on either side of the door. A wooden picnic table sat between the driveway and the house near the barn. The barn was sturdily built and well preserved for a large one of its age as a pre-existing part of the stately property, including pond and previously remodeled 3-story cottage. Their father assessed that it had been home to people before the Civil War, possibly a military family who had earned it such tracts of land through their government service and hired help from farmers for some of the renovations of the buildings. They had gotten it through their father's side of the family. Christopher's step-cousin, he had lived with as a child, had served in the Navy and bought it from his maternal uncle, who had gotten it in an auction. Ilarion, Christopher's step-cousin, had renovated it from cottage to house after receiving an inheritance. Great-uncle Harold had died young of typhoid fever at 29, following a work accident which left him debilitated at the age of 26, before Christopher was only 16 years old, and had held the property in his will for their father until he came of age. Ilarion was an apprentice for Harold until the typhoid fever rendered all of Harold's business functions impossible. A veteran infirmary station handled Harold's final days in Vermont. Harold had not fought in the wars, but had joined the army simultaneously with their grandparents. From the loft, where the table that Ted always used for books stood near the window, Ted could see across the whole front lawn, driveway, pond, gate, and road. He sat with his encyclopedia open in his chair, the copy of the dictionary handy he kept in the loft underneath the notebook he used for sketches, and 4 of his pencils. The preset chessboard sat on the other table. Refocused here, he began outlining the tiger from memory and glancing at the encyclopedia for reference. However, from moment to moment, he would look up at the road and the tall grass, bushes, and shrubs across from the house and the plot beyond. Soon, Mrs. Wilson was visible near the small pond, leaning over the short rushes. The next time he looked up, she was gone, and he was coming close to a finished picture, so he fervently maintained his artistry. As Ted's attention was grabbed and absorbed into art, his awareness of time's minutiae slipped away. Moments ago, he had finished 2 sketches of Siberians, a male and female, although he lamented that they were not much different. He heard the creaking of the wooden rungs of the ladder behind him and whirled around to see his brother's hands reach over and atop the loft platform. It was his true summer savior at last. From the noises below him, Ted knew he had at least brought one of his older friends to release him, gladly, from the functions which were beginning to remind him too much of the schoolwork he had supposedly escaped from.